Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from April 17th to the 23rd. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so, especially when we get whatever incremental reform we've been waiting for over 2 years now. And so with that, we're going to start with the good news. And firstly, just want to wish you all a very happy 420 for this past week. And the good news is, while we don't have any sales data yet, hopefully we'll have some of that next week to relay for you. Wanted to share this timely tweet from MJ Stock Trader. As Americans bought so much weed yesterday, they broke the e-commerce platform Dutchie. And so we'd love to see this. This comes from cannasseursio. So sharing Dutchie, the cannabis e-commerce platform, is having outages on 420, not really a surprise, affecting online order processing at multiple cannabis dispensaries. So SaaS platforms are good until outages crush an entire industry on the biggest sales day, similar to one of those AWS outages taking down Netflix and half the internet. So although when built right, AWS does offer cross-regional failover to reduce risks of outages on business operations and sales. Looking forward to reading a post-mortem from Get Dutchie when they get this back online. So all this to say is that Americans want to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars if given the opportunity, and it is just normalizing the holiday, which we do love to see. And so this is just a picture of the Dutchie website having troubles. And so with that, wanted to share some sales data from Florida, at least, because this is really what we've the only thing that we've got thus far, but big week for 420 sales. So thank you again, connoisseurs.io, for the timely data, obviously using the sales data out of Florida that we get week over week, but then punching it in to highlight that the week over week change for 420, we saw THC sales jump 54.76% for just this 1 week. Flower jumped up 35.96%. And then CBD sales were up 65.65%. So obviously 420 holiday leads to sales jumping by 50%. We love to see that. So again, this is for the past week of April 14th to the 20th, 2023. And so we'll show you the pictures. Otherwise, you can grab the link below and take a look if this cuts any of it out. But obviously TruLeaf in first place. Looking at THC sales, then Move by Verano, then Air Wellness, then Curaleaf, then Surterra Wellness. While looking at flower sales, TruLeaf again number 1, Verano number 2, Air Wellness, Curaleaf, and Surterra. Then for the next one, CBD, TruLeaf, Move, Air Wellness actually at 0.04, so Air Wellness isn't even competing. Essentially, TruLeaf, Move, Curaleaf, Surterra Wellness, and Fluent leading the way with CBD, and then total dispensing locations. And so with that, this is where we get that sales data from weekly, the Office of Medical Cannabis Use. So just to relay, new dispensary openings this past week from April 17th to the 21st. Air Wellness opened a new dispensary in Orlando. Fluent opened a new one in Pensacola. Gold Leaf opened a new dispensary in Sebring, and Sunburn opened a new one in Key West. If we look at the qualified patient count, big jump this week as Florida increased their qualified patients up to 810,685, which does represent a week-over-week increase of 3,427 patients. So nice to see that number jump back up, possibly as people wanted to get in the mood for 420, hence more of them signed up for medical cannabis. Not exactly sure, but with that, we see dispensations for this past week, all the MSOs that operate in the state, all the number of active dispensaries they have, and then milligrams of THC sold just this past week, making for very impressive 420 sales jump out of a state that is still medical only. And so with that, for marijuana moment, while we were hoping for more action out of Congress, we'll take what we got, as it does feel like the momentum is building, as bipartisan lawmakers file congressional bill to legalize medical cannabis for military veterans. About 50 years too late, but better late than never to get this going, as bipartisan House and Senate lawmakers are refiling bills to legalize medical cannabis for veterans, the latest in a series of cannabis measures that have been introduced in the week leading up to the 420 holiday. So this comes from Rep. Barbara Lee, and then Brian Schatz is helping lead the companion measure, but apparently the bill would temporarily allow veterans to legally possess and use cannabis under federal law, which is a huge win for them, as recommended by doctors in accordance with state law. And the more doctors that can prescribe a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative without judgment or consequence, the better. Physicians with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs would also be allowed for the first time to issue such recommendations. So this is huge. Doctors acknowledging cannabis as a medicine for what it is, while further the measure would authorize VA to study the therapeutic potential for cannabis, for pain and post-traumatic stress disorder. And we'd love to think that this would mean that they would frame the studies to look for medical benefits as opposed to harms, as they've done in the past. I have to take their word for it. And so more on this link if you wanted to grab the whole thing and read it, but wanted to share this as this is unexpected, but could be beneficial as Nats Fertig shares. Leadership did sneak one cannabis legislative thing in on 420. Schmuck Schumer filed cloture on the motion to proceed, the VA Medicinal Research Act per staff. So it seems like Schmuck gave the okay for this to actually be filed. The VA bill passed out of committee in February, and the vote on cloture on the motion to proceed is expected to be next Wednesday. So we'll try to cover this by my Wednesday video. Not sure if I will. Will probably be on my next week's Sunday video. But if it passes the cloture vote, the bill will head to a floor vote in the Senate soon after. And this would be the first floor vote on anything cannabis related. So it's a huge takeaway I would still consider. If it passes, it would be the second cannabis related bill to pass the Senate. The first being the medical research bill that passed last year and was signed into law by Biden. So for what it's worth, it's kind of weird seeing Schmuck actually do something as opposed to the standard virtue signaling and doing nothing for the last 2 years. And let's just hope that no new crisis pops up and gets in the way of this. But we'll update you next week. Now, just when Schmuck starts to give you a little bit of hope, though, he goes and says something silly like this. Can you imagine being in New York and being at this press conference and having voted for him for a social equity opportunity and then having him say this crap? Schumer says he plans to reintroduce CAOA. Yeah, not going to happen. Schmuck, stop trying to make fetch happen. Now, this is scary because ultimately Schmuck is in charge and he could carry on the same bullshit that he's carried on for the last 2 years. We never know, but this makes us feel a little more hopeful. So thank you, Don Murphy, for sharing this little bit at least. But Nats Fertig highlights that new safe banking tidbit. Senate Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown told me earlier this week that his banking committee would hold a hearing on just safe, not a package. The criminal justice stuff that's in judiciary, not in ours, he said, so that will be pulled together on the floor presumably. Now, while this sounds promising for a few reasons, one, it comes directly from the Senate Banking Chairman himself. Two, Sherrod Brown made some comments about 2 months or a month and a half ago saying that he wants to introduce SAFE by itself, but then the Silicon Valley banking crisis happened, and so that took the back burner. And then three, of course, if you don't solve the problem that SAFE addresses, there's going to be $30 billion in cash on the streets still, and people working at these dispensaries are not safe. They're going to be targeted for armed robberies, and sadly, it's going to lead to death. And so we don't solve that problem, it continues. Hence why I'm optimistic, but is it naive to think that Schmuck's just going to let Sherrod Brown go through with this, or are we getting to a tipping point, right? And so Seth Jacobs, great tweet down here, they will hold this as a political hostage till Q2 of 2024. I hope you're wrong too, Seth. And so obviously we've seen this for the last 2 years. Could we get 2 more years of the same, or are we at a breaking point? And this is promising, as Marijuana Movement shares. Booker says lawmakers will resurrect, not could, but will bring back to life cannabis banking bill so hundreds of businesses don't shut down. It's a little late to act like you care about cannabis now, Booker. If we have to wait another 2 years, it literally means that hundreds of businesses go out of business. Yeah, and hundreds of businesses have already gone out of business because you've waited 2 years already. And so you literally cannot make this shit up, and all we can do is find humor in his lack of self-awareness and be grateful that we are not Cory Booker, a sad pawn for the big pharmaceutical industry. And just a reminder, if you're not aware, the Dales Report sharing, many folks are disappointed with more promises to nowhere in DC today, but is it any surprise? Strictly following the money, it's hard to see how the cannabis industry can compete against a quasi-competitor in Big Pharma. As cannabis lobby spent $5.2 million in 2022, Big Pharma spent $373.7 million. So obviously hard to chip away when they have so much influence. And the saddest part is that the more data we get like this, and this is just my view, I could be wrong, but let me know what you think in the comments, is that it exposes America for being less of the democracy that it claims to be when 91% want cannabis legalized, and highlights that America is actually the oligarchy that it shits on other countries for being because corporations can pay to play for access. And I hate to use the F word fascism, but it's the binding of state and corporate power. And I do have one viewer that comments saying that the cannabis industry is fascist. No, it's sadly a fascist system, and they're one of the few industries working in it that's not actually getting help from the government, if you can believe that. So rant over, let me know in the comments. It's just, I hate to see what we're seeing over time, but we have to address it to know what we're fighting against, and at least, be aware. And so with that, the Hill, Republican voters back states' right to determine cannabis use. And so this is another opinion piece, just highlighting that there's support all around America, both sides, whatever color or however you identify. And so obviously, you can pause to read here for a little bit more. Just wanted to share as it comes from a mainstream article like The Hill, but recent polling shows an overwhelming majority, 68%, of likely 2024 Republican presidential primary and caucus voters support ending federal cannabis prohibition. So again, democracy in action would see cannabis legalized based on the will of the people. Why that's taking so long? It's not a good look on American Congress. And so with that, on to some MSO news as TerrAscend continues to progress towards TSX listing. So just a bit of info here. Preliminary proxy statement filed, which includes details of the internal reorganization necessary for listing. I'll bring you to in a moment so that you can pause to read, while shareholder vote scheduled for June 22nd, 2 months from now, with trading on the TSX expected to commence shortly thereafter, subject to approval. And so I do not own any shares in TerrAscend as of yet. I'm considering buying them, but so just wanted to disclose that. And so if you're interested, a bit more on this part from TerrAscend here, and then reorganization, here you can pause to read. Otherwise, of course, you can grab the full link below if you wanted to read through the whole thing. But a little bit more on that, pause to read. And then shareholder meeting, proxy statement, pause to read if you're interested. And so with that, Curaleaf to restate certain previously issued 2022 and 2021 financial statements. So I guess going from IFRS to GAAP, sort of like Verano, they've run into some things that they have to fix. Fair enough, it's not a big deal. Minor reductions in revenue of approximately 1.25% and 0.75% for 2021 and 2022 respectively. And so I don't own shares of Curaleaf, and so if you do or if you're interested, I would recommend reading through this more closely. But just to highlight, the company is finalizing the exact adjustments for these reported prior ends and currently anticipates to make the adjustment mentioned above. But as a result, subject to finalizing the adjustments described herein, the company expects its revenue for the fourth quarter of 2022, and these are the earnings that we're waiting for that they have until the end of April to release, to be approximately US $352 million, and its aggregate revenue for the full 2022 fiscal year to be approximately 1.337 billion. And so more on the full link if you wanted to grab that from below, but also wanted to share this from JJ's, 2J's on Twitter, highlighting what Boris Jordan, the executive chairman of Curaleaf, had to say at the Advisor Shares Cannabis event on 4/20. There is going to be a major lawsuit targeting 280E about to happen, well-funded, all the players. And if this is true, we'd love to hear it. Now, apparently there was a video, and I went to go watch it, and I was not able to access it. And so if you somehow recorded it or have a link, please put it in the comments, as I would just love to watch it, but unfortunately I did miss it. And so again, promising on top of all the momentum, especially hearing that Booker says that they will resurrect as opposed to they could resurrect. But also with that, thank you, Matt Kearns, for sharing this, former sell-side and buy-side equity analyst, founder of Greenwave Advisors, especially focusing on the tier ones, because with 4 years of public disclosures, I am better able to analyze and assess the financial and operational performance of the U.S. MSOs using company filings and GWA estimates for his data. This illustrates that the top tier and Planet 13 have consistently been able to generate enough free cash flow to pay 280E tax burden. And so obviously if the 280E tax burden was removed, that would mean that the top tier MSOs and Planet 13 would likely be the ones making the most free cash flow from their operations. And so that's very promising, just to highlight sort of what I've been saying. Obviously, things have not unfolded in any sort of way that's been beneficial for the industry, but over time, it's been said that the tier ones are the safest investment of the US MSOs, of course, if you wanted to take that risk. And so a very interesting visual that I have shared in the past, I believe, but it just relays that in the past and going forward, the safest investments based on the ability to produce cash flow from operations would still be the tier one MSOs. And so with that, some sales data out of recent states put into visuals that I wanted to share because they're interesting to look at. Thank you, Cannalorian. And this covers Michigan cannabis sales through March 2023. Below is February 2023. So of course, you can grab the link. Otherwise, just going to share what's available here. So you can pause to take a closer look at some of the trends. Notably, Michigan is an unlimited license state, so they give out many licenses to open many dispensaries to legally supply the demand. And while we are seeing prices drop to all-time lows, we're seeing all-time record sales still because the volume is increasing because people want to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars. Love to see that. So this covers total sales, adult sales, and medical sales. Well, this one looks at adult sales, adult flower sales, and adult flower sales per pound. You can pause to read. And then this last one looks at medical sales, number of qualified patients, and medical sales per qualified patient. But interestingly enough, the patient count goes down when people can just get the medicine from the recreational dispensary because cannabis is medicine. But with that, Cannalorian sharing Montana cannabis sales through March 2023. Of course, if you're interested in seeing February 2023, you can grab the link as well. But this is just one chart covering total sales, adult use, and medical sales thus far for Montana, which I believe launched January of 2022 last year. And with that, this quick one from Yahoo News, tax data, cannabis is big business in Arizona. Arizona obviously seeing the benefits of legalizing and reforming their laws. Just to highlight, since 2021, the state estimates sales for both medical and rec use at over $3 billion, making the state a lot of taxes and obviously providing a lot of jobs and other opportunity to those in the state. Thank you for ending cannabis prohibition, and that is why you get these benefits. And with that, Marijuana Moment shares some state news as well, some victories that we did get, saving it for later because there's a lot of news, but Delaware governor will allow cannabis legalization and sales bill to become law. Huge, good to see Delaware, nicknamed the first state, will become the 22nd state in the U.S. to legalize rec cannabis. And so from my understanding, I tried to find when these would go into play. HB 1 officially will become law Sunday after a 10-day legislative process where the governor has 10 days from receipt of a bill to either sign, veto, or take no action. So it seems like 10 days from now, it will go into effect and let the bill become law without their signature. HB 2 will officially become law Thursday, as per his announcement Friday. And from my understanding, he passed this without a signature. And so this will go into effect 10 days from now, I do believe. So here's what HB 1 legalization bill would accomplish, and HB 2, what it would accomplish. You can pause to read. A little bit more, you can pause to read. Of course, you can grab the full link if you wanted to go through the details, but just wanted to give you the juice and the bulk of the info. And with that, we might actually see the 24th 23rd state eventually come though, but Tom Engel sharing breaking. The Minnesota House of Reps will vote on Monday on a cannabis legalization bill that has cleared 15 panels in the chamber this session, and all the lawmakers in Minnesota seem pretty friendly towards this bill, and so that's very promising. We'll update you next week if this passes through, but this could be the 23rd state after Delaware, which would be great. And then lastly, Tom Engel sharing big out of Texas. Not legalizing or creating any adult use market yet, although that would be great, but the Texas House of Reps will vote on a bill to decriminalize cannabis, which is a step in the right direction, no longer criminalizing people, but at the same time, you're going to allow the black market to run rampant if you don't launch legal adult use sales, or at least create an adult use market to compete with the black market, and create a process for expunging cannabis conviction records next week, which is a huge step in the right direction for Texas nonetheless, and hopefully they can continue to build off that momentum. But one day, a population of 29 million, that's going to make for a monster adult use market. Well, I wanted to share this from Zero Hedge, who writes about all things finance on Twitter, has a large following, but of course, because it's 420, figured they would write about the plant. And so I just wanted to share how far we've come, as rec cannabis has now been made legal in 21 states and District of Columbia, and will soon be in 22 and 23 with Delaware and with Minnesota. While there are currently 37 states that have medical cannabis laws, now 38 because Kentucky was the most recent to pass their laws, and this is an older image as of November 9th. But get that, cannabis is still stuck in the Schedule 1 classification where it has no medical value and deemed too addictive for doctors to even prescribe, yet it's legal for medicinal in 38 states. Time to fix that discrepancy so people can take America a little seriously again, and just highlighting cannabis's growth into the U.S. mainstream. By 1969, only 4% said they'd tried it. Now it's up over 50%. Of course, this goes from normalizing it, having people ditch the old propaganda bullshit and trying out for themselves because legal dispensary outlets are there and they can actually access it, and a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids, alcohol, many positive things. And so love to recap how far we've come. Still a lot of work to do, but some studies to end before we head off from PubMed. Medical cannabis in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. So the objective medical cannabis has recently garnered interest as a potential treatment for neurological diseases, including Parkinson's disease. A retrospective chart review was conducted to explore the impact of medical cannabis on the symptomatic treatment of patients with Parkinson's. I invite you to pause to read for more info. The results do speak for themselves, as after starting medical cannabis, 56% of opioid users were able to decrease or discontinue. Now, I'd love to know how many actually decreased and then how many actually discontinued completely. That should be a distinction that they would make, but decreased or discontinued opioid use with an average daily morphine milligram equivalent change from 31 at baseline to 22 the latest follow-up visit. Another reason why Big Pharma hates cannabis and wants to keep it illegal, because if people are taking less opioids, that's less profit for Big Pharma's bottom line, and fortunately that's less Americans dying from the unfortunate opioid epidemic that is currently ongoing. And better yet, the medical cannabis was well tolerated with no severe adverse events reported and low rate of medical cannabis discontinuation due to adverse events, only 4 or so. And so conclusions, of course, very conservative, because whoever writes these journals has to appease the people that fund them. And whether it's the NIH or all that, we know that they've sort of been captured by some of the agencies that they are supposed to regulate. But nonetheless, the conclusion, the MC may improve motor and non-motor symptoms in patients with PD and may allow for reduction of concomitant opioid medication use. Of course, it may, as more than 50% did. But of course, they got to be safe and say large placebo-controlled randomized studies of medical cannabis use in patients with PD are required, as if we haven't studied this enough and it's time to just deschedule and do more studies focused on actually helping save lives as opposed to maintaining the status quo. And with that, this one comes from Science Direct, Impact of Cannabis Use Patterns on Symptoms in Patients with Cancer. So outcomes describe the relationship between symptom response, specifically disturbed sleep and anxiety in cannabis product use, and then 2, define promising doses and cannabinoid products associated with improved patient reported symptoms in adults with cancer. And so background and methods, you can pause to read if you're interested. The results mainly, the trend of THC and CBD ratio significantly associated with a 4-month average decrease in disturbed sleep score, which sounds very promising again. No reason for cannabis to be in the Schedule 1 classification. The median disturbed sleep score ranged 0 to 10, decreased from 7 to 5.5 after 4 months. A THC-CBD ratio of less than 1 was associated with a significant decrease in disturbed sleep and a non-significant decrease in anxiety, while the median anxiety score decreased from 6 to 4.86% after 4 months, thanks to a mix of THC and CBD. Sounds promising, especially for anyone with insomnia or that has trouble sleeping and requires sleeping pills. There was also a significant association between milligrams of CBD intake and a decrease in disturbed sleep score and anxiety. And so again, while the FDA and the DEA refuse to take any action to regulate CBD, clearly, while we don't feel it much, it's doing some work to help us in the background, whether it's helping reduce disturbed sleep or anxiety. But of course, in conclusion, cannabis products with lower THC-CBD ratios were found to reduce anxiety and reduce disturbed sleep for cancer survivors. Sounds promising, right? And that's why I always try to end my videos with studies to at least back up my claims. And hopefully we can just continue to spread the awareness, wake people up to this, and get that incremental reform that is desperately needed. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of today's stories? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.